Mr. Donahue, did you receive a follow-up call from a Department of Defense official about this conspiracy?
I did. I believe it was that same day.
Yeah. Can you give details on that at all?
I received a telephone call from Kash Patel, who I know was a DOD official at that time, worked for, I believe, Acting Secretary of Defense Miller, and he didn't know much about it. He basically said, do you know anything about this Italy thing and what this is all about? And I informed him that the Chief of Staff had raised the issue with us in his office on December 29th. That we had looked into it a little bit. We had run the name that was provided to us by the Chief of Staff. I learned that that individual was in custody in Italy. He had been arrested for a cyber offense of some sort in Italy. The allegation was that he had been exfiltrating data from his company. He was either an employee or a contractor of that company, and he was in custody. That the whole thing was very, very murky at best, and the video was absurd. But that we the department, were not gonna have anything to do with it, and DOD should make up its own mind as to what they're going to do. But I made it clear to him that I didn't think it was anything worth pursuing.
She called the video absurd, and despite the absurdity of that conspiracy theory, we learned that Mr. Meadows discussed it frequently in the White House, and Mr. Meadows didn't let the matter go. The request went from the Department of Justice to the Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller. As you'll hear, Secretary Miller actually reached out to a high-ranking official based in Italy to follow up on this claim.
That for him was, can you call out to Defense Attaché Rome and find out what the heck's going on? Because I'm getting all these weird, crazy reports, and probably the guy on the ground knows more than anything.
The Select Committee confirmed that a call was actually placed by Secretary Miller to the attaché in Italy to investigate the claim that Italian satellites were switching votes from Trump to Biden. This is one of the best examples of the lengths to which the President Trump would go to stay in power. Scouring the internet to support his conspiracy theories, shown here, as he told Mr. Donahue in that December 27th call, quote, "You guys may not be following the internet the way I do." President Trump's efforts to this point had failed. Stonewalled by Mr. Rosen and Mr. Donahue, President Trump had only one option. He needed to make Clark acting Attorney General. Mr. Rosen, during a January 2nd meeting with Mr. Clark, did you confront him again about his contact with the president? And if so, can you describe that?
So, at this point, Mr. Clark had told us that the president had asked him to consider whether he would be willing to replace me, supposedly on a timetable by Monday, the 4th. And so I had told Mr. Clark I thought he was making a colossal error in judgment, but I also hoped to persuade him to be more rational and to understood what we had understood, that there's not a factual basis for the fraud assertions that are being made. So at this meeting, Mr. Donahue and I met with Mr. Clark, and I guess my hopes were disappointed in that Mr. Clark continued to express view that he thought there was fraud, even though he had not been a participant in the department's review of that, and that he was dissatisfied that we knew what we were doing. So, but he had acknowledged that he had had further, I don't know if it was meeting or phone calls or what, but further discussion with the president, despite having, a week earlier said that if he wouldn't do that, and if he did, if he got an invitation to do that, he would let Rich Donahue or me know. So it was a contentious meeting where we were chastising him that he was insubordinate, he was out of line, he had not honored his own representations of what he would do, and he raised again that he thought that letter should go out, and we were not receptive to that.
Did he tell you that the president had offered him the job of acting Attorney General?
That was a day later. On the 2nd, he said that the president had asked him to let him know if he'd be willing to take it. Subsequently, he told me that on Sunday the 3rd, he told me that the timeline had moved up and that the president had offered him the job and that he was accepting it.
Well, let's ask about that. What was your reaction to that?
Well, on the one hand, I wasn't going to accept being fired by my subordinate, so I wanted to talk to the president directly. With regard to the reason for that is I wanted to try to convince the president not to go down the wrong path that Mr. Clark seemed to be advocating. And it wasn't about me. There's only 17 days left in the administration at that point. I would have been perfectly content to have either the gentleman on my left or right replace me if anybody wanted to do that. But I did not want for the Department of Justice to be put in a posture where it would be doing things that were not consistent with the truth, were not consistent with its own appropriate role, or were not consistent with the Constitution. So I did 4 things as soon as Mr. Clark left my office on that Sunday, the 3rd. Number 1, I called Mark Meadows and said I need to see the president right away. He was agreeable and set up a meeting for 6:15 at Sunday, so about 2 hours away. 2, I called Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, told him what was going on, and he said he would go into the White House to make sure he was at the meeting and he would be supporting the Justice Department's position as he had been doing consistently. 3, I called Steve Engel, who was, I was at the department, it was a Sunday, but there had been some reasons I needed to be there. Mr. Engel, I called at home and asked him if he would come in and go to the meeting, which he did. That proved to be quite helpful. And then number 4, I asked Rich Donahue and Pat Hovakimian, who had previously been my chief of staff, to get the department's senior leadership on a call and let them know what was going on, and which they did. And then Eric Hirschman called me to tell me that he was going to go to the meeting and that he would be supporting the Department of Justice position as well. So I knew that the meeting was on course and that I would have a number of people supportive of the Department of Justice's approach and not supportive of Mr. Clark's approach.
Did Mr. Clark ask you to continue to stay at the department?
At that Sunday meeting, when he told me that he would be replacing me, he said that he had asked to see me alone, because usually he had met with me and Mr. Donahue, because he thought it would be appropriate in light of what was happening to at least offer me that I could stay on as his deputy. I thought that was preposterous. I told him that was nonsensical and that there's no universe where I was going to do that, to stay on and support someone else doing things that were not consistent with what I thought should be done. So I didn't accept that offer, if I can put it that way.
And during that meeting, did Mr. Clark ask you to sign the Georgia letter?
That was on the Saturday meeting, January 2nd, that Mr. Donahue and I had with him. He again raised with both of us that he wanted us to both to sign that letter, actually.
So in that meeting, did Mr. Clark say he would turn down the president's offer if you reversed your position and signed the letter?
Yes.
Did Mr. Clark, so you still refused to sign and send that letter, I take it?
That's right. I think Mr. Donahue and I were both very consistent that there was no way we were going to sign that letter, and it didn't matter what Mr. Clark's proposition was in terms of his own activities. We were not going to sign that letter as long as we were in charge of the Justice Department.
Thank you for that, by the way. Mr. Donahue, were you expecting to have to attend a meeting at the White House on Sunday, January 3rd?
No, as the acting AG indicated, we had a meeting that afternoon that related to preparations for January 6th. So I was at the department, but I had no expectation of leaving the department. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was there in civilian clothes, as we both worked, and expected to have that meeting, do some other work, but I had no expectation of going to the White House that day.
So let's ask, so prior to that Oval Office meeting, did you set up a conference call with senior leadership at the department? And if so, tell us about that call.
Yes, so obviously it was a bit of a scramble that afternoon to prepare for the Oval Office meeting. We had discussed on several occasions, the acting Attorney General and I, whether we should expand the circle of people who knew what was going on. It was very important that Steve Engel know, and that's why I reached out to Steve on December 28th, because if Mr. Rosen were removed from the seat and the president did not immediately appoint someone else to serve as Attorney General, just by function of the department's chain of succession, Mr. Engel would be in the seat. We wanted to make sure he knew what was going on should that occur. So the three of us knew. We also brought Ad Hovakimian in, so the four of us knew. But no one else, aside from Jeff Clark, of course, knew what was going on until late that Sunday afternoon. We chose to keep a close hold because we didn't want to create concern or panic in the Justice Department leadership. But at this point, I asked the acting AG, what else can I do to help prepare for this meeting at the Oval Office? And he said, you and Pat should get the AAGs on the phone, and it's time to let them know what's going on. Let's find out what they may do if there's a change in leadership, because that will help inform the conversation at the Oval Office. Ad Hovakimian subsequently set up that meeting. We got most, not all, but most of the AAGs on the phone. We very quickly explained to them what the situation was. I told them, I don't need an answer from you right now. I don't need an answer from this phone call, but if you have an answer, I need it in the next few minutes. So call me, email me, text me, whatever it is. If you know what you would do if Jeff Clark is put in charge of the department. And immediately Eric Dryben, who was the AAG of the Civil Rights Division, said, I don't need to think about it. There's no way I'm staying. And then the other AAGs began to chime in turn, and all essentially said they would leave. They would resign en masse if the president made that change in the department leadership.
Incredible. I'd like to look at the assistant attorney generals on the screen. If we can pull that up, have their pictures. Did every assistant attorney general you spoke to, as you said, agree to resign?
Macon Delrahim was not on the call only because we had some difficulty reaching him. But yes, the other people on the screen were on the call, and all, without hesitation, said that they would resign.
Part of the Select Committee's investigation, we found out while Mr. Rosen, Mr. Donahue, and Mr. Engel were preparing for their meeting at the White House, Jeff Clark and the president were in constant communication beginning at 7 a.m. White House call logs obtained by the committee show that by 4:19 p.m. on January 3rd, the White House had already begun referring to Mr. Clark as the acting attorney general. As far as the White House was concerned, Mr. Clark was already at the top of the Justice Department.